Hello beer geeks, today the Lord has giveth us our daily pastry as we visit the Church of Omnipollo.
For our first international trip in nearly 3 years, we needed to go somewhere we'd never been before, to experience something completely new and to make a film unlike anything we've ever made. Now for our money, there aren't many breweries that have had such a profound influence on modern beer as Omnipollo. If they didn't quite invent pastry style brewing, they've gone on to define it, producing ever bigger, thicker imperial stouts with more unusual and unlikely flavour combinations presented in wilder and more innovative ways. This is beer pushed as far as its definitions can go.
Oh my god.
The timing was perfect too. After a decade of contract brewing, Omnipollo opened its own brewery right in the midst of lockdown. Being Omnipollo though, there had to be a twist, and that twist was that it's in an old, deconsecrated church on the outskirts of Stockholm. But it wasn't the only surprise. Keep watching as we learn all about how they get those incredible flavours into their beer, the unlikely origins of the brewery, and most shockingly, about our apparently shared love of traditional German lager. All that and more, starting with a tour of the church itself from co-founder Henok.
Thank you. Come in, join me. 7 tanks right here, another 4 in the back. German equipment, fully automated.
And why'd you go for a German kit?
It's been a dream of mine ever since we started thinking about opening a brewery, which in a way we didn't until quite recently, given our 11-year journey. But the last 5 or 6 years, it's been a conversation piece, and it's kind of like getting German engineering into this equation is nice for repeatability, but just overall, I mean, we are in Europe, and it's just nice to work with something that has a clear kind of foundation here where we are, like sense of locality.
So we're stood in the area where people would have sat during church. What can you tell me about the building?
So this was a church for many, many years, and then it has been repurposed. So it was repurposed, and it's been an art space for a while. It was empty for a while. You had birds' nests, broken windows. And then it was a brewery for about 10 years before we came in to this space. So we were absolutely blown away the first time we were here, which is about 3 years ago by now. And there was a cafe at the top and a small brewery down here. And we started having a conversation about, acquiring and taking over the space. And ever since then, it's just been a wild ride in trying to make it into a production brewery, which is essentially kind of the big transition, which is a bit of a challenge, like creating something beautiful in a beautiful space, but also enough of it to kind of go around.
Yeah, we certainly fitted in a bunch of tanks in what is quite a small space really, but I guess you got the height as well, which
we do. It's an 18-meter ceiling height. So actually, even if these tanks are big, my first thought when we got them in here was we could have gone bigger.
Feels like the phrase "we could have gone bigger" is quite an Omnipollo sentence. You probably say that
every day. Every day.
So the beers that you're making here is obviously you're still contract brewing with all your partners. Is there something different about what you're making here? Like, does the fact that you can serve it bang fresh make a difference to what you decide to make? Or
it's a really good question. I mean, we work with the best brewers in the world, so just trying to match the quality of what they make for us with what we can make ourselves is a challenge. What we do try to kind of bring into the world of Omnipollo is high drinkability and lower ABV, which is something that I think as a contract brewer, where you're there and your kind of added value is innovation, kind of gets lost a little bit. So brewing pale ales and lagers, for example, is something that we are trying to focus quite a lot on here.
Because with those beers, it's like, and we say it on the channel quite a lot, it's like go to the source, that's where it's best. But obviously your source was, a contract brewery, whereas now you can be like, you can come to the source and drink these beers.
Definitely. I mean, freshness for sure, absolutely. We do have very good logistics around our contract brewing as well. But it's kind of also the idea that a pale ale or a kind of hops, yeast, malt and water beer is more dependent on process, because we're all working with the same ingredients, right? Like we source them from the same places. but kind of how do you do your pale ale? And having your own brewery, I kind of think makes it worth your while if you're going to brew those type of beers.
Yeah. So talking of process, should we have a look at the rather special bit of equipment that I know is just around here?
Let's.
That's the secret to many of your beers. So this thing, it looks like something's crashed into the side of your tank here.
It has. It's a boat motor. So this is a hop gun, I guess you could call it. I mean, it does fit hops, but we try to see it more as a spicing tank, which means we're adding cocoa nibs, we're adding almonds as of right now into a stout, fruits, coffee, but also hops, obviously. And I think the challenge for me was, since I still also kind of see myself as a home brewer, like coming to a respectable big equipment producer like Braucon and saying, hey, I want to be able to create these recipes, I made them in my kitchen, kind of poses certain challenges. Like how do you add, 3 or 4 or 500 kilos of coconut to a beer with ease? I didn't want my brewing colleagues to kind of give me this sigh,
having to be there with big paddles and breaking up things.
Yeah, as soon as you'd come with an idea.
So when people talk about pastry brewing, I think a lot of the time we expect it to be, extracts like pumping in flavorings and stuff. And I guess you must do a bit of that, but you're trying to use and source original ingredients as much as possible.
Definitely. I mean, I'm a friend of technology. If there's a way to make my beer taste better with, an extract or an adjunct that might not be from a, have a very romantic story around it, I'll definitely use that. But we've just naturally moved towards more natural ingredients as time has passed, simply because we're getting better results, and also because you have time and resources to kind of travel and pick and be very and can be very kind of like mindful around what ingredients we're putting into the beer. And so I think being able to source coffee straight from the coffee grower, like that just warrants us using that as much as possible. We just get excited.
So you've taken the idea of serving beer really fresh now that you can to an extreme by serving straight from tank with these lagers.
Yeah, that wasn't actually a part of the original plan, but we did have this space. We knew we wanted to have some horizontal tanks to brew lager into and to lager into, and then we kind of quickly realized, okay, if the tap room's going to have them anyway, let's not package and create extra work and extra transfers around this pretty fragile product. So we just figured we'll start tapping them. They're way too big to be serving tanks, but as it turns out, it takes about 6 weeks to finish one up at the tap room, which is just about perfect. So we've started doing it that way.
Right, yeah. And what sort of concepts are you trying to bring to your lagers? I mean, obviously it's so different to certainly what your export markets will expect from Omnipollo. Are you playing around with lager, or are you being deeply traditional in how you do it?
That's a good question. I mean, I love Czech lager, but since we are working with a German equipment provider, we select our hops from Germany. We also have a pretty big internal lobby at the company Omnipollo for German lager. We've just decided to focus on that for now. And so we're brewing Pilsners and Helles, essentially, at this specific moment. And we'll probably go in and venture into Czech lagers as time progresses as well. It's been a beautiful, fantastic, amazing thing to be able to do it, and honestly, I never thought we would be able to brew and sell lager as a craft brewery in any serious way at all. But it seems as if that's happening on a broader scale as well, which is really exciting, I think.
Yeah.
One thing that was great about having 4 different tanks for lagering is that we rotate them. We fill them up as they are being consumed, and since it takes a bit of time to consume them, they can keep on lagering away. So the idea is you come to the church, at any given moment, and you'll have lager that's been taken 4 months to produce or something.
So it's almost like the inverse. So most beers start amazing and start to tail off.
Yeah.
With these, if you're getting the last pour, that's the pour you really want.
That's pretty nice, and especially now that we're getting up to speed in terms of brewing a little bit, I think what you'll be having when this tank is over is probably a 3 to 4 months lager. I mean, that turnaround, like, yeah, it's pretty rare, I think, to be able to like hold the beer for that long in tank and make sure it's like really, really crystal clear. And
So design has obviously been a huge part of Omnipollo. I think, you know, when I first discovered Omnipollo, it's because I saw a candle on a can of what's now called Maz. Is that sort of a teamwork kind of thing, or is that more Carl?
Very much so. I mean, it is Carl for sure, but the teamwork is between the beer and the artwork. And artwork, Carl is artwork.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it's been a huge benefit for our journey and the ability to be able to present beer and beer styles to a broader public, for sure. I mean, he's a wizard, and it's been absolutely amazing.
Something that your beers have always done with those flavors that you've used, and then in that packaging, it's going to do the same.
It's a joy. I mean, you want to brew for those like labels. I mean, it's amazing. It's like the opposite, you know.
Well, we happen to have a designer on the Team of Craft Beer channel in Brad, so I know Brad is going to go and have a chat with Carl.
I mean, the most amazing thing about working with Omnipollo is nowadays is that I'm actually in the factory. You know? Like I'm in the brewery. So every day when I walk through the brewery, I walk through the bar.
Get the vibes. Let the beers talk to you and inspire you.
Whisper.
That's it, man. Should we go and check out your layer?
Let's head up.
Let's do it. Does the organ still work?
The organ still works.
Wow.
I mean, we have to tune it.
Nah, I just leave it.
Yeah, I mean,
It's crazy out of tune.
for now, it's we're gonna leave it the way it is because an artist friend of mine, we invited him here to like just check it out and see what he could do with it.
Yeah.
And I told him that we could bring in someone to tune it, and he was like, no one is touching that organ. Like, it's been untuned for like ages, so this is the way it's supposed to be.
Right, okay.
So,
It's
we'll
like
see what
lived in.
happens.
It's
We'll
got
see what
that
happens.
sound.
Welcome.
Beautiful, man.
So we're still moving in. There's a lot of bits and pieces not where they're supposed to be. But on the other hand, that's like the way it's always going to be up here, I think.
Yeah, it's a
Things moving
creative
around.
space.
Yeah,
So everything's in flux all the time.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
This wall is just amazing.
We still have half of it left to unpack.
Yeah.
But it's great. I mean, this is actually one of my most important tools, the actual stuff that we made, because it's, I mean, we constantly produce new products, right?
Yeah.
And there's like new labels, new formats, new ways of printing, blah, 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 blah. So, like the reference library is number one to me. It's super important.
I mean, the colors that you achieve and some of the printing techniques are wild. Like, I've not seen them on any sort of products, really, with the kind of luminous stuff and the mirror finishes and all that stuff. Like, you really push the boundaries of the materials, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the reasons for that is when we started out, we just found everything so bland. Like everything in this segment was just like, it looked the same. I mean, it was cool stuff out there. It was stuff that we really liked, super like sort of fancy-y, weird, like do-it-yourself type stuff.
Yes.
Or like everything that just looked like the way beer has always, like quote unquote, always looked, you know. So we just decided to like start from scratch, and why not just apply, ourselves onto the stuff that we're making,
Yeah, man.
rather than like trying to like emulate something else. So this is what came out of it.
No, I mean, there's nobody else in the world like Omnipollo when it comes to how it looks. It's incredible. What are your main inspirations? I can see acid house, psychedelia, all kinds of like avant-garde kind of stuff going on.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up reading comic books,
right?
Like a lot of comic books, and I think that really sort of shaped my world.
Because they have to communicate without words necessarily and be like really immediate.
Yeah, and also like growing up reading comic books, also in languages I didn't understand, like French, or like when I was like 4 years old reading like American comics and stuff, like Marvel comics and stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, that definitely communicates without having to read a whole bunch of stuff, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's super important. That's also why I try to keep the words on the back of the labels, or like hide them away as much as possible.
Yes.
So like the info should be in like the eye candy rather than, and then there's like some boring bits and pieces on the back as well. Like the name.
Names are boring. Names are boring.
ABV.
But that, I mean, the eye candy idea for me is like the beers are like drinking eye candy, if that makes sense. So it's so appropriate that you kind of want to take it in when you look at it, and the beer matches it. I always think the beers match incredibly well.
That's awesome.
What's on the outside.
I'm happy to hear that. I mean, because it all came together, bit by bit, so to speak. Like, the first beer we made, I didn't even taste it before I made the design for it, and I hardly knew Henok at the time. We just met, and then it took about a year until we made the second beer, and then we sped up a little bit, as you can see.
Right, yeah, just
like
a little
11 years later, we have a whole bunch.
So you do have like big stories behind the main themes. Like there's obviously like the kind of the sunset kind of on the ocean kind of thing, and the like floating feathers and all this kind of stuff.
I think rather than trying to like describe what's inside the bottle or the can or like whatever container it comes in, I try to express something about the vibe of the beer. Something that I catch from, like, if Henok speaks about the beer in a certain way,
like a poetic kind of way.
Yeah, you could say that. Make it sound really highbrow, but to an extent. I mean, but also funny. Like something that's funny. I try to make it quite layered, so it's something that should be easy to grasp. But then if you do a little bit of digging, there should be some treasures in there. Yeah.
So Carl, what's your background before Omnipollo?
I actually met Henok at a quite interesting time. I just been working for quite a long time with a fashion brand, a clothing brand.
Yeah.
Called Cheap Monday.
I'm wearing Cheap Mondays right now.
Really?
Yeah,
what a coincidence.
Yeah, exactly. No, this is what I always wear. They're getting a bit tired now because they're hard to get hold of. But
so me and a friend of mine, we were responsible for like the graphic expression of the brand.
Right.
It was about like cheap, fast denim.
Yes.
Very like stretch denim, like quite rock and rolly. But then, like, the imagery was super important as well, because it was all about like playing around with rock and roll, symbolism in a sense. Like, like what is a skull? Like what is attitude? What is blah blah blah?
Exactly.
We're playing around with that a lot, and I think those ideas is something that I brought with me into Omnipollo, into Cheap Omnipollo.
Yeah.
I try not to make too much of a like divide between different types of projects.
Yes.
If it's in a gallery, or if it's in someone's house, or if someone's drinking out of it, or if you're like flipping through it. It doesn't really matter to me. I also try to reuse a lot of ideas, but like kind of maybe turn them inside out or upside down, or
because I've noticed a few themes kind of running over different things. Like you'll take an element and then expand that out,
right?
Which is awesome, because you're building this sort of universe of visual language.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to me because I start somewhere and I don't know where it's going to end up. I mean, I don't have like a final destination for this thing.
Yeah.
As with the beer, obviously, you grow as a person, you grow as a company, and you grow in each other's company.
Yeah.
And you kind of create something together, and I don't know where we're heading. I'm happy about it.
To get a sense of where they might be headed, we then went back downstairs to join Henok to talk through the beers and concepts behind the brewery, and to address the way that Henok pours his pilsners.
Okay, so let's get into the weeds of Omnipollo. Before we do though, we need to talk about this. Like, this is like the Grand Canyon of Pilsner pours.
Yeah, man, we had time today. So this is a Pilsner that's also seen a bit of oak, and we also dry hop it lightly. And it's called Dag, which basically means the little droplets that are on...
Dew. Like condensation.
Dew. Thank you.
Oh, okay,
Dew.
there we go. Well, I'm going to have to take a sip. How does one attack something with such a grandiose head? Just
dive right in.
Just straight in.
Yeah, just stick your nose in it.
It's beautiful and dry and crisp with all that honeyness but not sweetness. It's beautiful. It's really great. And it's amazing to come all this way to Pastry Town and to start with a lager. But the history of Omnipollo, right? You started with a Belgian blonde, right?
That's right. That was our first beer. It was a Belgian-style blonde ale, lightly dry hopped with a bit of Amarillo and Simcoe. So it had this like kind of floral, more modern touch to it. And then we also fermented it super dry with wine yeast, like champagne yeast. So that was kind of the unique selling points that we were throwing around as we launched that beer.
Yeah. So, I mean, that is sort of a world away from where certainly like the export markets will know of Omnipollo with the sort of the pastry style brewing. That was from your home, that was a homebrew recipe, I guess, of yours that you...
Initially, yeah.
So tell me how you got into homebrewing.
I worked for a pub chain here in Sweden that specialized in craft beer and single malt whiskey. And I'm not a whiskey drinker, so it just like naturally leaned towards the beer side of it. And as soon as I found out that you could brew beer, it enticed me the idea of doing it. And then once I started, which was quite a few years after I started working for that pub chain, I just got bit by the bug, the homebrew bug.
I know the bug so well.
Yeah, and so pastry stouts, for example, I think are perfect to brew at home. Like those are my earliest memories of actually producing something at home that resembled what a commercial beer looks like were imperial stouts. Lager a little bit was, at least for me, a little bit harder.
Tricky to do, yeah. So how did you come on the scene? How did you guys meet, and when did Henok rope you into his homebrew experiments?
So I met Henok in, what year was that? 2010?
Yeah, I think it's 2010, yeah.
I think it was 2010, yeah. And a mutual friend of ours actually called me up, I think, and said, I'm in the same room with this genius named Henok, and he wants to make beer, and he's going to make like the beer of his dreams. But he's a little bit worried that it will look like a nightmare. So
I was very worried.
I need your help. So I knew her like from like the art scene in Stockholm, basically, and you guys go way back. So she just like made us, and, and we met up and became really good friends. Henok basically told me about this new project of his. He was making a beer, one beer, Lyon, that champagne yeast beer, and I mean, it sounded exciting. I wasn't like super deep in the like craft beer game at the time. I mean, I was drinking a lot of beer, but like any beer basically.
Yeah, whatever's on tap.
Yeah. Whatever was in front of me basically. And Henok kind of showed me like open up this new world, which was awesome, because I think you had ideas of how to open the craft beer world up in itself, in a sense, like change it a little bit. I mean, we were both fans of a lot of stuff that was out there, but that was already there, right? So we wanted to like find something new and change it a little bit. And the same went for the looks of the beers, basically. So I mean, there wasn't anything that really excited us in the way that it was portrayed, or the way it looked on the shelves, or in a glass. Creating is making something new, right? Mm-hmm. Not being as conservative as possible. Yeah. I mean, I love a lot of like conservative beer styles and stuff. It's not that. I love a lot of the old brands, or the brands that stay the same, whatever. I mean, I really respect that. It's just not in our DNA. Actually.
How do you get to like weave craft beer into a broader context of pop culture? And I think Carl really kind of quickly brought us to a place where we could blend in with other forms of expression very easily. So it was like in art or music, it just felt like a natural component, and that's definitely connected to the artwork, I think. And it was such a like cool experience as a beer geek to be able to say, hey, I don't even have to speak about the beer. It's just going to like naturally make its way into different contexts. So that was really cool. But it took like 4 years or something before we opened Omnipollo's Hat, I think.
Right.
Yeah, at least.
At least.
I mean, it was a whole lot of like home brewing in your kitchen type things happening before that. I mean, we even made the book before we opened the bar, right?
Yeah.
And the home brewing book is basically, I mean, I wouldn't call myself a home brewer. Like I kind of know how it works.
Now you are. Now that we wrote the book.
Yeah, but it's basically Henok showing me how to home brew in his kitchen without socks on your feet.
So you opened Omnipollo's hat, and then was it after then that the pastry revolution kind of happened to the world and to Omnipollo?
That's a good question. It kind of happened incrementally, I think.
Right.
I mean, we did do a couple of beers before that were like we were adding marshmallows to beer and stuff like that. But you are right to a certain extent, because there was a beer in our portfolio called Noah Pecan Mud Cake that was launched at the same time as the bar opened, and we'd just done it on draft. We did like a small kind of thing around it, and people just like got really excited. So it was like, okay, let's kind of do more in that vein. If I'm not mistaken, we'd done Yellow Belly already. So it's like...
I think Yellow Belly was
possible, yeah.
before, yeah.
So it was pretty clear that the bar was going to have that element to it. But it was, it's definitely just, it's been incremental somehow. But like, but by that point it was like...
I mean, looking back, Yellow Belly, I guess, feels quite... I mean, the packaging was always going to be controversial, but the beer itself, compared to where pastry style brewing has gone, was quite safe. It was an addition of flavouring of peanut butter, essentially. Should we do a jump cut and try something a bit pastry and have a chat about that?
Yeah.
So we have in front of us Elmer Nimt.
Elmer. NMT is short for New Money Ticker.
New Money Ticker, right, okay.
Yeah.
So this is about as pastry as it comes, and it's nitro, right?
It is, yeah, it's packaged with nitro. And we've kind of recently started doing that. And we find that these heavily adjuncted beers get a really nice head, regardless of how much kind of fat and other things that are generally not very beneficial for a
so
good
like
head.
nuts and stuff have the fats that can destroy
Head,
and that's a way to get it back.
Yeah.
Cool. But we have to pour these in a special way.
Yeah. And you also need to twist it over, turn it over twice. Like this, yeah. And we've done that. You just open it and hard pour it. Should have a nice...
Thought that could have been a prank when it then exploded.
Exactly. Okay.
It's coming.
It's coming.
So it's a hard pour, but it's a slow formulation of the head.
It's a pretty thick beer. It's 18 to 20 Play-Doh finishing gravity, which means the bubbles are really struggling to come out.
To get through the liquid.
Yeah, they're really struggling to come out.
Crude oil.
Yeah.
So this one has coconut, vanilla, and coffee in, and lactose as well?
It does,
Everybody?
yeah. It does have a little bit of lactose, yeah.
I mean, we've been talking about this lots. We're also going to be home brewing an Omnipollo inspired version, but like, what's been really interesting is hearing you talking about how seriously you take the sourcing of the adjuncts. Like we said earlier,
very
people
serious.
think often it's just extracts or stuff, but this, what went into these, the coconut, vanilla, and coffee?
So I think the most select ingredient in this is the coffee. So this is a coffee that we've sourced in Ethiopia. We're very far down south, close to Sudan, and it has it has a really nice character, and we chose it from a farmer that we know, and he sent a couple of 100 kilos over to Sweden, and then a couple of his friends in Sweden roasted it for us according to specs for this beer. So it's a pretty kind of tedious process that goes into it, but it's usually worth every minute of it.
In your office, you had like a supply chain office. Like,
that's right.
I'm not sure that there's any other brewery that has that, but that's how much sort of effort goes into sourcing what's going into the beers. And this is incredibly complex on the nose. Like obviously there's lots of coconut and vanilla, but also like cinnamon, spices, and that kind of stuff. That I guess that's coming from the coffee.
That's from the coffee.
Yeah. And with how far sort of pastry brewing has come to become, within a sort of certain subset of breweries, it's incredibly important to those brands. Like Other Half, were hazy brewers, and now there's huge amounts of adjunct brewing going on and stuff like that. Do you think when it gets to that scale, it can be a little bit dangerous and distract people from the 4 core ingredients, or is it an important conversation to have about these flavors and the diversity that it has brought to brewing?
That's a complex question. I think that variety is kind of the reason I got into craft beer in the first place. It's like the idea of not having to repeat purchase this macro thing that somebody offers me. And so I think that's kind of why it becomes attractive, especially if you're running a tap room or, you know, you're trying to give people more sides of the same coin. I know Sam, the other half, for example, loves to drink these beers. Why wouldn't he brew them? You know, and I love to drink his beers. Why wouldn't I brew, you know, hazy IPAs and so on and so forth? I mean, you know, and then the focus obviously changes from brewery to brewery. But I think the variety is like what it comes down to, really. Kind of like keep on pushing the boundaries to get to a point where it's, you can offer that as much as possible.
And I mean, with Yellow Belly, as an example, that was a very conceptual beer, right? I mean, there was nothing like it around at the time, and we wanted to make something that was, you know, based on a concept. That concept was, you know, had to do with the packaging, the content, the way that it was going to be sold and perceived, blah blah blah. You know, it was like it was like an art piece in a sense. And then we just picked things from that to like show different angles of what you can make with that with those ideas, like different parts of that concept, basically.
I would say like year 3 or 4, it just kind of like more and more became clear that, okay, if we're going to be working with exports, you know, we're going to have to create a beer that makes sense to ship from Europe to LA. I mean, it's like, and we were sending, I mean, up until that point, we were sending pale ales, you know, and IPAs. I mean, that just felt less sensible. It was more like, hey, we're gonna need to create something that's unique from an idea perspective and export that idea, essentially, rather than the hops, yeast, malt, and water kind of export. And which means now the next step in that journey is to brew locally, right? So that's also like the ultimate kind of like export of an idea rather than like a physical product.
So you sort of brought it back home, and this church has become a place where you can. You said while we were walking around about how you've visited so many breweries and sort of relied on the kindness of strangers so much, and now you can give that back to local community by brewing super delicious, fresh beer styles. And also, when people come now, they can brew. You could brew it on Omnipollo now, which wasn't something that had ever happened.
No, definitely.
And on that note, a few more church beers were cracked, and we took the opportunity to, somewhat drunkenly, absorb everything we'd learned in the last few days.
So we finish off our tour of Omnipollo with the first beer I ever tried from Omnipollo.
And their second ever beer,
And
right?
their second ever beer. This is a double dry hopped version that we saw packaging at the packaging plant. There have been so many things that would stand out from this trip to Omnipollo. The first one is the hangover yesterday.
Oh my God.
But, I mean, what amazed me, we turned up, we landed, we came, we had, I think, 3 Pilsners right off the back, which I wasn't expecting. I knew they'd started their lager program, one of which was a wet hot Pilsner, which was incredibly exciting to try. And then we had easily the best smoothie kind of style beer I've had in that beautiful the blueberry lassie that we had on Omnipollo's hat.
It's incredible.
With the incredible pizza. And then we got stuck into the Imperial Stout. Loads of coffee, vanilla, coconut seems to be a big thing. And like just the sheer diversity of it.
This is it's truly a multi-faith church of beer. We are not just talking...
Non-denominational.
Exactly. I think we thought it was just about the pastry, but my God, it's about the hops too.
Yeah. You know, something I'd never thought about, and something, you know, even on the plane over, I was thinking about when we talk about the ingredients that are going into these beers, and we're going to be talking about extracts, real ingredients, hybrids, and the amount of effort that's going into the sourcing of specific vanillas, specific coffees.
Yeah.
Like, completely transcends this idea of pastry brewing being a shortcut way.
In no way is this a shortcut. There's not less energy involved, there's not less thought involved.
I think Omnipollo said something really nice when we were, Henok said something really nice when we weren't filming. It was when we were in the car, and he said you can't make a pastry stout without a smile on your face, but that doesn't mean you're not taking it seriously. And the same can be true of drinking it. You can't drink a city pastry stout without a smile on your face, but that doesn't mean you're not going to think about the sourcing of the coffee, the vanilla, the coconut. So if you get the chance to come and visit Omnipollo, you absolutely have to. If you get a chance to try their beers, you know, if you've ever dismissed them or if you've moved away from them, come back, because, you know, the nuance, the excitement, the joy and the geekiness is all there. All the things I love about beer are here at the Church of Omnipollo. Amen.
Amen. You said Omnipollo.
Omnipollo.
Honey, give it one more chance. Honey, give it one more chance. Honey, give it one more chance.